Do we like the jacket? Are we good here? Am I business casual enough? Okay, we're good.
That one? Yeah, that's the one. Let's pop this. Perfect. Nice. Throw this down. Yeah.
Ooh. Shoes. Little matching, little suede on suede. Okay.
Usually I have like 3 or 4 pieces strapped to my neck to hold the microphone on my face while I'm dancing.
NumHub. NumHub.
Going in the pocket. Pocket's perfect. 8 years of records ago. What's Resborg?
And action.
In the late 70s, AT&T decided they wanted to get into the computer business. They already, as most of us know, were a monopoly, and so the Justice Department was not in favor of letting them also get into the computer business. So it went through a series of legal proceedings, and the decision was that AT&T would spin off all of their local telephone business. So they were not allowed to carry any calls within what was called LATAs at the time, which were local areas, and they could only carry long-distance calls. And in exchange, they would be allowed to get into the computer business. So what we at Pacific Bell ended up having at that point was we could only do telephone calls that stayed within a LATA. We couldn't do anything that was long distance. So the LATAs were generally geographic areas, although there was a lot of gerrymandering. At one point they were trying to put San Francisco and Los Angeles in the same LATA so that they'd be able to handle those calls. They didn't let them do that. So between the Justice Department and the FCC, that was what they called the breaking up of AT&T, this decision to have local traffic only done by Pacific Bell and long distance done by AT&T, and now AT&T's competitors, which there really hadn't been much in the way of competition before that. So a RESPORG is short for Responsible Organization. There were a group of us who designed everything around how this process was going to work. The reason that RESPORGs were developed is because the FCC realized that there was competition now in long distance and even some in local, but there was no competition in 800 service. And the reason was because all of the telecom equipment routed calls based on the 3 numbers that it saw after 800. So if you had 800 car rent and your carrier was AT&T, it's because AT&T owned, although we don't really call it owned, the 3 numbers that spelled car. And that meant you couldn't change to another carrier because there was no way for you to take that number and go to another carrier. And it wasn't just that there wasn't a process. All of the telecom equipment in the country had to be all reworked because it was built to route 800 calls based on 800 and the next 3 numbers. So we in this group, there were about 10 of us that met for several years in the mid-'80s, developed everything from what was going to have to be done to the switches down to the details of how long somebody had to release a number. So a RESPORG were companies that were allowed to operate within the national database. All the toll-free numbers were dumped into one database. Before that, all the toll-free numbers were kept in the individual carrier switches. But for this change, everything was put into a national database, and the companies who were authorized to go into that database and turn numbers off or move them from carrier to carrier, or what we call porting numbers, which is you have an AT&T service and you want to move to Sprint. How do you get your numbers moved from AT&T to Sprint? So that was what RESPORGs did, Responsible Organizations. If the carrier is your RESPORG, they control your numbers.
We believe in simplified and intelligent local and toll-free number ownership, identity, control, and management for every organization and individual in the world. In the mid-'80s, this privilege was granted to all the service providers in the United States. And in the mid-90s, we extended this privilege on to everyone who should have ownership and control of their numbers. Those who do know about us and find out about the fact that they can have ownership and control of their numbers immediately sign up and are customers for life. The problem is we just need more people to know about this and that it's available to the world.
Our platform allows enterprise business users to easily manage their toll-free numbers. It has been simplified so that it's easy to use. You don't even have to have a lot of in-depth knowledge of the telecommunications industry to be able to go in and have that ownership, have that control, and manage those toll-free numbers. So what makes us different is that most other ResPorgs are also carriers. And with us, we are carrier neutral. So when customers come to us, they can use any carrier that they choose, sometimes even choosing multiple carriers. So we recently just launched an update to our new UI. So the UI, you might notice it has a modern, cleaner look to it. The user experience has been simplified, so much easier to kind of navigate around in that platform. We do have fraud control that's also just been added where you can go in, really go through your toll-free numbers, see the fraud ranking or the risk score that's associated with them right now. And then you do have options in there to help mitigate those scores. So that's something that's really exciting that just came out. And then of course we have one-click disaster recovery. So with just a little bit of pre-work to set up those scenarios. In the event of an outage, you just have to log in, literally one click of a button in that UI, which is also going to be mobile friendly. So if you need to initiate disaster recovery, maybe you're at your kid's soccer game, baseball game, right from your phone, you can simply log in, click the button to initiate disaster recovery, and within a few minutes, all your numbers will be back up and online.
They're wanting me to talk about the port control platform. Is that like port control platform, or is that like port control platform? What is that?
So we believe in a solution that provides one platform that gives the entire industry a collaborative experience to perform what it is they need to do in all aspects of number ownership and control.
Port control is a simplified yet intelligent solution for our clients to have authoritative number ownership and control. We simplify an industry to allow our clients to have authoritative ownership over their number porting. Prior to port control, our clients would have to log into, if they wanted to port numbers from AT&T, from Verizon, from CenturyLink, they had to log into each one of those portals separately to be able to port from them. They would submit what's called an LSR, a local service request. They'd have to go into Impact to be able to port that number, and then to create what's called a subscription version, an SV. Once that's created, then they would have to go somewhere else or wait until that port date, and then they would port that number in. They would activate it. So it's very fragmented. You can't just, it wasn't done in one system. So, and then for port outs, to manage those, they would receive emails, and if there's something wrong with that request, then they would have to reject it. An email goes back out, and then the gaining carrier would again have to submit another email. So it's a lot of back and forth, and a lot of it's a difficult way to keep track of all the different aspects of porting. Port control solves that issue. I think the administrative burden is not having one central place to process all your ports and to keep track of all your ports and reporting, knowing what numbers are porting from you each month, each day, however often you want to pull that, of knowing when numbers are returned to you because you're the native holder of that block. Port control has reports that you can run to know when numbers are being returned that have ported out from you. Port control gives you the ability to run a porting report to know if at a certain time frame what numbers ported in from your SPID, what numbers ported away from your SPID, whereas before there was no way of pulling that. Well, you could pull a report from NPAC, but it costs $75 per region per pull. So we don't charge that with Port Control. There's no extra fees for porting reports. So we now have an additional feature for local number porting, and it's wholesale porting. You can now use our platform to process your internal ports under your SPID, as well as any wholesale porting relationships that you have with other carriers.
We have recommended NumHub many times over to other partners here in Canada and in the US. I would say that these folks are the best in the industry and have been doing this forever, and their response level and their service is one of the best we have ever dealt with.
NumHub's port control has been extremely impactful on our daily porting tasks at IdeaTech. The sheer simplicity it brings to the table is worth every penny. There's simply no reason why every carrier shouldn't be using port control.
After over 8 years of doing business together, I can confidently say that NumHub is not only one of our longest standing vendors, but also one of the most pleasant to do business with.
Our world is going digital, and I believe the future of our company is to ensure our customers can make their phone numbers their digital asset. I see that as being an NFT or some other form of tokenomics. We'll be watching closely and ensure the ownership we provide aligns with the globally adopted digital standard.